Hello, everyone, and welcome to Healthy at Work. My name is Catherine Wilcox, a workplace health specialist with a big passion for helping people thrive at work. From the home office to the corporate office, from the assembly line to the front line, I've got you covered here for your healthiest life at work. Now, let's dive into today's show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healthy at Work. I'm your host, Catherine, and this week we are talking about rest. Now, at the time of recording of this session, it is June 2026 in the Northern Hemisphere, and so many of us in our working lives often look to the summer months here, which tend to be July, August, even September now, to just find time to step away from work, to engage in restful activities and playful activities. I was thinking about this a lot in my own life at this phase, just being through a really busy period with life and work and just really wanting that time for rest. Why is rest so important to us performing well at work, to being sustainable in the work that we do? I think it's really important to understand that, as human beings, we require replenishment. Our bodies require replenishment. Our cognitive abilities do too, our creativity even. We were simply not designed neurobiologically to be working, I believe, at the pace that we do in modern working life. It can be very taxing physically, emotionally, socially as well. And so in today's episode, I wanted to talk a bit about the different kinds of rest and why they can be so incredibly important to having a healthy and happy working life. So the first kind of rest that I wanted to speak about was physical rest. So this is when we take time to get enough sleep, when we take time to maybe nap during the day, when we take time to replenish our physical body. So for some of us, that might be by engaging in activities like meditation or yoga or stretching as well. So filling the physical body back up with, rest, energy, and replenishment. Now, why is this form of rest so important? I think for so many of us, we skimp on this area of our life significantly, and there can be very different reasons for that. Some of us may be trying to fit more hours in the day because we have a lot of caregiving and work responsibilities, and staying up later, for example, or getting up earlier is the way that we find time to connect with ourselves, often at the cost of our sleep. Some of us may have things that are interrupting our sleep in our life, things that we love, even, like our children or our pets or a snoring partner. So there can be these disruptors that are environmental as well, right? Maybe we are sleeping in a room that's too hot or too noisy or not dark enough to really provide us with that nourishing sleep. But this, does actually add up over time and does impact us in terms of our ability to, focus. We know that a lack of sleep, affects our immune system, our attention, right? And if we work in a safety sensitive position, for example, it can have real impacts on, the safety of those around us in the public, depending on what we do for work. So rest, incredibly critical to filling us back up and, being well in the work that we do. Now, rest is also mental in nature, right? We all do different things for work. Some of us have very mentally intensive careers, so it requires a lot of executive functioning, a lot of focus, a lot of problem solving, highly technical tasks that require, again, focus, planning. Um, some of us engage in interpersonal work that, requires a lot of a focus and attention paying as well. That can be really taxing on us mentally. So what does mental rest, mean? It means perhaps varying tasks. So taking time away from particular tasks in order to use other parts of our brain, right? Perhaps the more creative part of the brain, in order to, get some relief from the mental intensity of some of the work that we do. So rest can be mental as well. And what's interesting as we begin talking about some of these different forms of rest is, we don't necessarily have to save it all up to, a couple weeks in the summertime in order to rest and replenish our systems. As we go through these, I'd really invite you to think about ways that you can bring more of these various types of rest into your day to day. Sensory rest. So this can involve removing ourselves from highly stimulating environments. So, sensory stimulation can come, from any sense door. I think about things like lights, for example. I know if you work in a physical office or in a plant or in a factory, there can be, very heavy lighting sometimes above us that can, provide an impact, on us. Noise is another thing. Um, different industrial noises, but also, beyond that, just thinking about being in environments where there's a lot going on, a lot of social chatter, for example. Some people find that very difficult. To navigate, in the workplace, especially as people are returning to the workplace, right? Some people need a lot of quiet in order to focus and do their best work. So sensory rest involves, closing the eyes sometimes, putting on the noise canceling headphones, or removing ourselves from environments that are overstimulating, for us, so that we don't have to constantly, process ambient stimuli in the background. And this is something that, can again be very nourishing for our nervous system when we engage in this type of sensory rest. Emotional rest. So for some of us, our work is highly intensive on the interpersonal front. Perhaps we are working in really close proximity to things like human suffering, which can take a toll on us. So emotional rest, allows us to, if we, encounter again a lot of suffering or trauma, perhaps in the work that we do, to step back and think about regulating our own nervous system. There's many different ways that we can do that. For some of us, some of these other forms of rest that I've talked about are actually things that can really support nervous system regulation. But you're thinking about the ways that we can, maybe step away from situations that are activating, anxiety, for example, um, and allow ourselves some time to find that sense of inner balance. Social rest. So some of us have highly social careers. Some of us might not. So we might be more technical fields, or maybe we have a workplace, for example, where there is a lot of social interaction, interpersonal interaction, and we're all different people. Some of us, get our nourishment from being alone. Some of us get more nourishment from interpersonal interaction and being in a social environment. I would put myself into the introvert category myself. I love people, love people. And I also need time to myself, time to recharge and renew my energy. So social rest means really thinking about the people, the relationships, that nourish us, and being really mindful with our time and energy around that. Maybe it means declining certain social invites, or declining to be in certain social environments that take more than they give back to us. It can mean time alone, quiet time, removing yourself from interpersonal interaction, just so you can reconnect with yourself and focus on that relationship that you have with yourself. So social rest. Creative rest. This is something that can also be, again, not the 2 weeks of the summer, but, way we go about our own work. Creative rest involves allowing that space to be creative. And so, we live in an attention economy where we are constantly bombarded by messages around things that we need to do, to buy, to fix about ourselves, or fix about our workplaces even. Creative rest allows us to kind of stop and just allow ourselves to be bored, to allow ourselves, not to be stimulated by inputs from the environment, but, space to just be. And when we engage in this type of creative rest, often we get our best ideas to solutions and problems that we're struggling with. I know this has happened to me many times where I've walked away from my own desk, grappling with a really difficult interpersonal problem, or a work related problem, and then come back a lot more clear headed, with an idea of something to try, a way I could go about resolving it. So, creative rest, we can also think about creative rest in this particular way that when we engage in creative tasks, it activates a different part of our brain region, which, can be a very nice balance if we, are using, the logical part of our brain, for example, heavily in the work that we do, is to allow, creative hobbies and interests to nourish us and to fill us back up. What we do for creativity can vary for each of us. Some of us, might like to cook or to crochet or to collage or to make bread or, go on and on and on. There's a number of different ways we can use our creativity, but doing so can actually often nourish us, also by helping remind us that we are people outside of what we do for work, right? We have other things in our life that are important and worth investing in, and reminding ourselves of that is something that can be very helpful, again, as we navigate our working life. And this last form of rest, spiritual rest. Now, I appreciate that term might not resonate with everyone that's listening. We all have different ways of understanding the world and the world around us. And so, the way I like to think about this, as opposed to it being about any specific faith or religion or spiritual path, is the rest we can feel when we allow ourselves to connect with something that is beyond ourselves or greater than ourselves. So for some people, that might be, the environment. It might be the community. It might be important relationships. We all have different ways, again, of understanding the world. What I will say about this particular one is, how it can show up for me at work sometimes is allowing myself to be carried by something beyond my individual role in the workplace. So I'll give you an example. I've had the good fortune of being able to work for, a number of organizations whose mission I believed in very deeply, whose values I believed in very deeply. And so sometimes when work would become incredibly difficult, for whatever reason, that could carry me in the work. I'd find a lot of meaning and purpose in reminding myself why I was there, what we were trying to do, collectively, the purpose of the organization I was working for, how we were supporting and serving people in our community. So, that sense of spiritual rest again can be about connecting with the greater meaning beyond your work. So, one way of thinking about this for me is, yeah, what difference are you making? And everybody has a difference to be made, regardless of what it is that they do for work. What difference are you making in the world around you? And reminding ourselves of that is something that can help us look up a little bit, from the work that we're doing, and having our heads in it so deeply, and remind ourselves that there's, a broader impact that we're having in the world around us through our work. So, that's it for the different forms of rest. And again, my invitation to you, as you may be thinking about, planning out some holiday time or vacation time at this time of year, is thinking about ways of weaving these different forms of rest into your work day, into your work week, and not just waiting, for that week off that you have or a couple weeks off that you have to experience these different types of rest and the replenishment that can come with them. Thank you so much for listening and watching this week. I invite you to take great care of yourself, to rest, to take care of one another, and we'll see you back here next time. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening today. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not medical advice or mental health treatment. If you're struggling at work, please reach out to the supports within your workplace or community. This podcast was gratefully recorded on the unceded and ancestral homelands of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations.